Hello, everyone. Welcome to Alta Asks Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta's digital editor. We have people, it looks like, from all over the country tuning in. Michigan. Hi, Jennifer in Michigan. People all over the place. I know Debbie Mayer's in San Diego. We've got Palm Springs, San Francisco. I'm in Marin County. I know Blaise and Po are joining us from San Francisco. Before we get going, I just want to do some really quick intros. I am super excited to welcome journalist, author, and perhaps most importantly, Alta contributor Po Bronson to today's Alta Asks Live. Po is the managing director of IndieBio, the world's leading biotech accelerator, and among lots of other things, the author of numerous books, most recently, Decoding the World, A Roadmap for the Questioner, which he wrote with Arvind Gupta. And so that's what Po's here to discuss with us today. And please do ask Po your questions, either in the comment section or there's a question button. Po's going to be chatting with Alta's managing editor, Blaise Zerega, for about 20-25 minutes as I gather your questions, and I will pop back up at the end and we will get to as many of those as we possibly can. If you've missed any part of today's conversation or want to share it with everyone you know, you will be able to do so sometime this afternoon at altaonline.com. If you're new to Alta and you're unfamiliar with us, Alta is a quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. You can learn tons about us at altaonline.com or about our new and exciting book club, the California Book Club, at californiabookclub.com. I'm going to get out of your hair. I'm going to throw this over to Blaise and Po. And again, I will be back at the end. Blaise and Po, take it away.
Thank you, Beth.
Right. Thank you, Beth. So, Po, welcome. Great to see you again.
Hey, buddy. Good. Always great to talk to you.
Yeah. And so, first of all, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
I have an electronic version, so I can't hold up the hard copy like you do. But congrats to you guys. And I did a little writing. We did a little interview published a couple of days ago on Alta. And I called this, a buddy tale for nerds. And I meant that as a compliment. It's full of science, lots and lots of science. It's great. And there's so many big challenges for it, right? Climate change, genetics, extraterrestrial life, COVID, so on. And we're talking a little bit in the green room before this about COVID. And, is that the biggest challenge facing us right now? What do you see, and what's IndieBio's role in it?
Okay, so the COVID, when it landed, we'd been tracking it since around Thanksgiving. And we'd been tracking strange cases coming out of Wuhan. We were ready when the genetic code was released on February 8th or 11th or something like that. Yeah. The team behind me here, the people back here, they use CRISPR to do diagnostics. And there's a few companies doing this. They invented within like 5 days a diagnostic test for COVID. Wow. And unlike the other ones, they went to the highlands of Argentina and they found a unique Cas enzyme that works at room temperature rather than working at like 39 degrees C or 37 degrees C. And because of that, it's insanely accurate. It's like the most accurate test. LabCorp says it's like the most accurate test. So we funded that company. We created a company that's in clinical trials right now using an old antifungal as an antiviral. That data looks really good. That's in clinical trials right now. We actually did spun up 8 companies. And so we all went home, and it was it was hard, but we felt powerful, actually, because we could do something about it when most people felt helpless, right? Yeah. But in the context of the world overall, I just want to say, this is a phenomenon we're going to have to get used to and learn to deal with, and have systems to deal with it much more rapidly than we do. And I think that's what we're investing in and building. But bigger challenges include, where COVID started, China itself. I think that people are surprised in the book, not surprised to hear we're talking about genetics, not surprised we're talking about inequality and economics and AI and things like that. But I think people are a little surprised by the way we describe the challenge that China presents in the next sort of 50 years period of time. And that's because they kind of embody everything. They are, yes, an autocratic or sort of fascist economy kind of thing, but they are in AI, they're in genetics.
You had the five-sided chessboard at one point.
Yeah, before I got to IndieBio, I was obsessed when I was working with our old friend Josh McHugh. I would wake up every morning and I would do this lucid dreaming, trying to figure out the future. As a futurist, I was like, I got to figure out actually the future. And like, how do we deal with the fact that there's so many mega trends all happening on the same time frame? And I was trying to figure out sort of the next 20 years of Earth. And I described it as a game of five-sided chess, where player 1 is climate change, player 2 is genetic revolution, player 3 is AI and robots, player 4 is China, player 5 is the war on truth and the weaponization of hate. And I tried to see how the future would happen. And I could never really figure it out. And when I got to IndieBio, I began to look at it quite differently 2.5 years ago. I began to see it as, wait a minute, China is actually controlling the other players in this five-sided chess.
Yeah.
And that they are, in ways that the U.S. doesn't really see, have created their own World Bank and are sort of exporting their system to 120 of the world's 195 countries by building their cities for them. So all around the world in sort of frontier markets, Chile, Croatia, Uganda, places like this, China is having a massive impact, sort of building their economy and building into their cities the Alibaba city view. So all the systems that China has can be used by other countries if they want them.
Right.
It's pretty scary.
Well, yeah, but it's also an example of the four other sides: AI, robots, I guess even weaponization of hate, and so on. Those are all kind of Silicon Valley byproducts, I guess, right, or invention. And at one point,
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, but you also are both optimistic and critical of Silicon Valley. In fact, in the book, you talk about this phenomenon that Silicon Valley likes to talk about cool future technology as if it's going to be a very big deal very soon, when in fact it's usually not even close, to being ready for more than a decade or longer. And so, how do you
much longer?
Yeah, and so how do you balance that? I'll call it healthy skepticism that you've had in your career as a journalist with this sort of optimism that you need to have as an investor seeking. How to fix things. And something to remark on it is when you're describing COVID, you guys move very, very fast. I mean, the traditional venture capital investing cycle can take weeks, months, and so forth. And you were basically, writing checks almost on the dime.
It kind of comes down to this, like as a journalist, you and I both on this 20 years of going off to see some startup and they get to know you and they tell you all this stuff, but there's stuff they're not telling you. And there's like secret sauce that they're not telling you. And I, as a journalist, wanted that secret sauce. I wanted that secret sauce. And that's sort of, I wanted to go deeper into the science to actually get behind the curtain, kind of. And coming here to IndieBio was a way to do that. I could sort of essentially be exposed to all that, learn all that. And then kind of through like knowing the science, I could make much better judgment on a kind of a deep navigation way that like there's all this hype saying we're going to this, we're doing it, we're going, there's all this hype. And I could be like, yeah, but the science, that ain't going to work when you really get under the hood, or that might work, but that's 30 years out. And I could navigate my life with a greater sense of not being a candle in the window, whipped around by the open flame of all this hype going around the world. And it centered me as a person. It's not like I'm here to be a venture capitalist. I am a venture capitalist, but I'm here because it centers me. It makes me feel like knowing the science is a better rudder to navigate, this very, very befuddling 20 years that are in front of us.
And, I think that you love all your children equally, of course, but what developments at IndieBio excite you the most? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about IndieBio. And I know we sort of set this up already, but give us a little tour too.
Okay, so
he's in IndieBio today.
IndieBio is I'm here at IndieBio. IndieBio is like the punk rock of biotech. Well, we are unlike all the other VC firms. We first of all, like 40% of our founders are women. We're extremely diverse. We have about 136 companies that are worth over about $3 billion. They're from 37 different countries. We pull like brilliant scientists from all over the world, and we write their first check. So we're sort of the smallest check in the venture capital business. We offer less than $500,000 to startups, and we get to take a lot of shots on goal. We get to try a lot of things. And certainly, like, we call it human and planetary health, but planetary health or the climate is certainly probably front of mind for everybody on the team. And I'll just take you around real quick, because like behind us is the team Casper, which, as I described, they're in different offices here, invented the CRISPR-based assay. And I'll just quickly take you downstairs. But this is like a garage. We're down in South of Market. It's kind of a cool hangout space. We're not that busy because of COVID, but and I'll take you back into this space, but we get to have fun. It's like most startup offices, and sort of a kitchen and ping pong and phone booths. But what makes us really different and unique in our world is that we're the only venture capitalists to have a lab in our offices. So we have a lab spaces for about 50 different scientists, and that makes us totally unique. And so this lab is a Biosafety 1 lab, and that's like for 36 scientists. And then we have back here the BSL2 lab, where we do things with sort of doing actual gene editing, not micro. Look, doing gene editing we'll do of microbes we'll do in the other lab, but if it's human cells or it's viruses or it's mammalian cells, we'll do it in the more sophisticated lab.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And you can't go into a lab because you have to put on booties and hazmat suits.
Yeah, when it's not COVID, I can walk in there, I'd take you right in and show you the equipment. But I guess it's worth saying, like, this stuff looks sophisticated and fancy and intimidating, and I think it's really important not to feel that way. Like, basically most of the things in the lab are remarkably similar to what's in your kitchen. Almost everything in the lab measures something, sorts something, heats something up, exposes it to more or less gas, and you are essentially kind of slowly cooking things in a way that takes a few days to operate. Mm-hmm. And then you remeasure and you kind of see whether it worked. It's like, it's not actually as strange as we often make it out to be, right?
I love, I mean, a lot of the book talks about genetics, and you know, you offer up recipes of, you can order different sequences.
Oh yeah, like to do gene editing, you go to a website. I mean, there's like hundreds of them, and they're like, buy 3 get 1 free, and like, we'll send you this. It's just like any other retail thing, and you can buy all of your genetic constructs, all of your reagents. You just buy it, it shows up, you just put it down here, you put it in the cooking equipment, and then hopefully you edited something or changed something or suppressed something.
Well, one of my favorite chapters in the book, and for those who haven't seen the book yet, the chapter titles are headlines from news stories. And there was one, it's chapter 19, and the headline was "Playing God, We're in the Midst of a Genetic Revolution." It's from CBS News. And in there, you sort of lay out an argument, and that asks me and asks people who read the book to really question their understanding of genetics, that genetics is not determinism at all. And in fact, you even have like a little Easter egg, the genetic code here. It means it's something about it's not inevitable. It's
nothing. Yeah, on the cover of the book, this genetic code inside the MC Escher head spells out nothing is inevitable. And
there's a fallacy, right? Because we've always
we believed the most important thing to understand about genetics is really a philosophical element, and we actually identify it with the battle over question of free will that is run through philosophy for all of humankind. right?
Mhm.
Do we have few free will? And when Charles Darwin sort of began to tease out genetics, ever since we have, as a society, thought of genetics as deterministic. And in fact, a tiny fraction, tiny, less than 1% of genes are deterministic. Most of them are responsive to the environment. And so they in certain situations, your genes do this. In other situations, they do that.
Right.
And what that means is that the environment is the ultimate gene editor. It means that that nature and nurture are in fact one and the same.
Mhm.
And what that means is that the last 150 years of philosophy, which has been trying to battle against determinism, has actually been wrong. And it was this the Mendelian concept of genetics that we all learned in 9th grade biology, that genes determine these things. Though that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the less than 1% of genes. The vast majority, and the most interesting stuff is like learning that gene therapy.
Yeah.
Gene therapy doesn't edit your genes.
Mhm.
We all assume it does. And it's like, oh my gosh, you can't do these permanent changes to people or babies. That's crazy. It doesn't actually edit your genes. It just kind of goes in your gene for a short period of time, goes into your cytoplasm, expresses some protein, and disappears in as short as 3 days, depending on what kind of cell it's in.
You debunked the idea that scientists are playing God.
Yeah.
Or geneticists, I should say, because you also make a prediction, one of the few real predictions, I think, in the book, which is that within 25 years, scientists are going to create life, and not synthetic life, but somehow put the primordial soup, or whatever you want to call it, in a black box.
Right. And we're not, well short of 25 years, we'll be doing things like reviving woolly mammoth genes and growing little baby woolly mammoths and stuff like that, sort of bringing things back from extinction. So there's a lot of stuff that sounds like playing God and bringing that, but we're talking about making life out of non-life. We're talking about reproducing the origin of life on Earth. And that, yes, scientists are about perhaps 25 years away from actually reproducing this moment. They do it inside gold boxes to try to recreate these conditions. And it was in this chapter where we investigated this, like, how does that really happen? That the real question was, like, why would I ask this question? The real question is how it affects the question, the philosophy around what is the meaning of life.
Right.
Like, if life happened once, and we're all just a lucky accident after that one time, then it's really, really magical, and you want to hold on to it. Like, existentialists have always asked, is life meaningful? And they would say it's not inherently meaningful. It's up to us to write that meaning. And what we learned from the origin of life is that it was actually inevitable that life happened.
Yes.
Not impossible, inevitable that life happened. Now, that doesn't mean that my life is inevitable or your life is inevitable or that we would be human beings as we are today, but that biological life was, in fact, an inevitable extension of the Big Bang. That the second law of thermodynamics and the fact that the entire universe is in pursuit of better and better energy dispersers. Biology and human beings are the best energy disperser. we run the gamut. We run amok on the planet, doing all sorts of things like chewing up energy. Yeah,
we do. But and speaking of life, though, I mean, what are your feelings? You touch on this in the book too, about longevity and human life. You know, do you think aging is a disease? It was sort of a flavor of the month a couple of years ago.
So a lot of media attention to the field of longevity, and I do find it super interesting, but I do think that a lot of what people have read to date is a bit misguided. And I would say that we readers of this kinds of news stories need to understand that humans already live an insanely long time. That we spend the first half of our life with a really fast metabolism, and then we extend the rest of our life where maybe we should last 10 years. We last another 50 or 60 years with a really slow metabolism. And so making our life longer isn't really, I don't think, going to happen. Might be a little bit, but it's about in the end, what kills us are things like cancer and Alzheimer's, and it's finding ways to better defend ourselves against those disease states that will allow more of us to live longer. But it's not really, I don't see us living to 120 years or 150 years, that kind of thing.
So as someone who is seeing new technologies all the time, looking at different areas for innovation and so forth, there's a phrase you repeat in the book a couple of times that sometimes it's just technology in search of a problem. And that's a phrase that I've used to describe cryptocurrencies. I'm a skeptic on that. But there are legitimate things that come out of labs. I mean, like quantum computing and so forth. And so what
quantum computing, for what it's worth, is in search of a problem to solve, because it was literally, Feynman literally said we need to create quantum computers to study quantum physics. They were created to study physics, not created to serve Microsoft or Amazon. But I will say, or Google, but I will say that quantum computing now is fascinating because you go on the internet and you say, why do we need quantum computers? No one's telling you the truth. They're saying, oh, we're going to design drugs. We're going to do this. Like, no. We do know. It's about national security. With quantum computers, you could crack every password instantly in the world. We could hack people's weapon systems. We could drain everybody's bank accounts of all the money in the world. So whoever gets to quantum computing first has an insane leverage on the rest of the world, kind of a nuclear weapon kind of way, meaning you wouldn't necessarily use it, but it is a kind of a huge mess to nations and economies, whoever gets it first. So it's more about national security than Apple versus Google or Amazon versus Google.
Right. And so I guess another sort of thing about national and international things, you also write a little bit about climate change. And you say the question really isn't whether or not climate change is real. The question is really, why can't we all agree as a world to address climate change? I mean, and why is that? I mean, how do we get past that? What's your feeling?
Okay. Yeah, we read about climate a lot in the book, and we have created a lot of climate solutions here. I'm not going to run through them for a second, but to stick to your question, so why don't we agree that we need to address climate change? I mean, part of it is that it's like, okay, well, we're rising tides, like it's just going to happen very slowly. What people don't quite get is this accelerant of all of this sort of methane stored in the ice, and that when we hit a certain point, then it becomes sort of irreversible for a long time. And then so we can't like go back the other way, almost like you can't break an oil tanker. An oil tanker has to start slowing down 6 miles from shore type of thing, and you can't stop it, and it's inevitably going to collide. We're in that kind of a situation. I do believe we can stop it. We have all the solutions we need to stop it. We can make more, but we do have the solutions we need for climate change. We just don't actually use them intensely enough. But I think that's changing. I think that's coming.
I'd be remiss if I don't mention this, because when you're talking about life and the origins of life, it almost feels like it's a mathematical certainty that there's life elsewhere. And I was tickled to see a story that Poe wrote for Alta about Greg Hallinan in the Owens Valley building a massive array of radio telescopes. And sort of the story is titled The Planet Hunting Machine. And there was the collapse of the giant radio telescope on Puerto Rico past couple of days. And so I wanted to ask, what do you think that will accelerate more telescopes like the kind, or telescope arrays, I guess, the kind that Greg Hallinan was building in Owens Valley? And then also, what do you think about the idea of sending a telescope to the dark side of the moon?
Well, let's just go right to the dark. I mean, I think there was a great story to go report with you guys, and great fun to work with you on it. And I couldn't help but put it into the book because it sets this premise of searching for life on other planets. And it's only about 10 years away that Greg Hallinan's array, which is set up in Central California, is going to be on the dark side of the moon. And it needs to go to the dark side of the moon because the interference created by our own atmosphere kind of blocks a certain part of the radio wavelength that we need to get at to really measure these things. But what Greg had built with this series of really, really cheap a field of antennas, and that they're going to reproduce on the dark side of the moon, allows us to look for planets that have atmospheres and are in sort of the Goldilocks zone.
Mhm.
And what he's specifically doing is measuring essentially aurora borealis type phenomenon around these planets, where their sun is hitting their planet with these bursts and it's causing these auroras, and those are measurable millions of years later to thousands of years later to tens of years later, here in our solar system. And I do believe that, I think it's extremely exciting to know that, like, highly likely there is some form of life on these other planets.
Okay.
And the funny thing about it is the way that, like, at first when I heard this stuff, I was like, man, do we really need to go to other planets? We just need to solve our own planet.
Right.
But the strange thing is that, like, Mars terraforming teaches people, well, if we could do it on Mars, we could do it here.
Mhm.
We could do it, and we could turn New Mexico back into Oregon and make it nice and flush, like,
Bring back the Mastodon, right?
Yeah, we could bring back the Mastodon.
All right. Well, also wait. So on that note, I'm getting pinged from Beth that there's a number of questions that have come in, and that she wants to make sure we address. Beth, are you going? There we are.
I'm back. Can we also just mention, and I know we don't have time to talk about this, but we should do a whole other episode on, Po, you basically described bringing back the woolly mammoths. It's like the opening 20 minutes of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Well, also
predicting
the mastodons, supposedly, right?
Our one of our scientific advisors, George Church, has been actively working on that project, and we've been trying to persuade him to let us do the woolly mammoth right here, or the mastodon. We have recreated gummy bears right here. Like, it was actually like right there at that desk that we recreated gummy bears from mastodon using essentially mastodon kneecaps or their cartilage, right? The DNA of their cartilage to make gummy bears out of it.
How were they?
Tastes like chicken.
All right. Okay. Questions. Oh, this is from David in Palm Springs. David, I'm reading your book right now. Question for Po. One of my favorite questions for philosophers and futurists. How would Po define the moment before the Big Bang? And he finds your comments about the inevitability of life fascinating.
So I have not studied extensively pre-Big Bang concepts. This sort of concept of it was pre-time, it was pre-everything, pre-God, pre-laws of the universe. So I don't really have a take on that. That is something that's going into the next book. I need to study it more to really know what I have to say there as sort of pre-Big Bang. The sort of the concept that it defies the mind's ability to think beyond time. Quantum creates this possibility that we either live in multiple dimensions or we live in multiple times. And I'm more of a multiple dimension person. Arvin's more of a multiple time person. But strangely, it sounds impossible. But strangely, our minds travel in time every day. We go back in our memories. We project into the future. We read history. And so traveling in time through a mind is actually far less weird if you actually think of it as something we actually do all the time.
Okay. All right. Ileana would like to know, what do you think is missing from science communication / storytelling that would help contextualize the deep science for a wider audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have to get science out of a silo. And that's kind of what we were doing with the book. We were taking we wouldn't say what we wrote in the book was that deep of science, but a lot of people are like, even the scientists are like, you went deep there. but we were putting it alongside references to popular literature like Fight Club. There's several Fight Club references, and there's Jason Bourne movies and Kim Kardashian, and like blended into our culture in a way that we normally don't. We normally, it's like science. Oh, it's science, and get in a silo. You got to read everything. And we just try to sort of say, no, you don't have to do that. And I think the most important thing is to, in order to make us scientifically literate, and even like for business people, dare I say it, go learn some science. Like the fundamental thing is to get it out of its silo and to make it facile and fun to play with and fun to learn again. Science creates such intimidation around itself, and we have to break that down. People shouldn't be scared to go into a lab and feel stupid, right? No one likes to feel stupid. So we just shouldn't teach it that way. We shouldn't think about it that way.
All right. We're running out of time, but I'm going to grab Jennifer's question. How economics tie into quantum computing? Are there outside forces guiding the science?
Yes, there are outside forces guiding the science of quantum computing. They're called national security for sure. Like, I wouldn't just say guiding. I'd be like, I got two hands on that wheel. But let's be super clear. I see 1,000 startups a year. We do 20 a year. I mean, I look at 1,000. Like, there's never one that says I have a solution to inequality. And if quantum is sort of this greatest magical thing on the horizon, it's not a solution to economic inequality. And it's, Blaise, as you said, a lot of these things are the creations of Silicon Valley itself. Network-based systems where there are winners and losers, and that are making more and more of the world essentially living at a really, really different standard of living. Don't get me wrong. Sort of the capitalist system is lifting 140 million people out of poverty and into the global middle class every year. That will be 3 billion more people by 2050. We only have 1 billion people living at Western standard of living today. So we're going to 4x that because of capitalist economic growth. So a lot of people are coming out of poverty globally. Domestically, more and more people are learning to live on less and less and less. And it's a lot easier just to surf the internet with your phone and save money and don't do anything, and drive for Uber now and then. And we've taken massive swaths of our society. 70% of our society has less than $50,000 a year in income and has less than $500 in savings. And there is nothing in, I don't have the answer is to raise the minimum wage. That is not a scientific thing. That is a moral thing. So this is about, science doesn't solve everything. Let's be super clear.
Yeah. Well, I think in the book you sort of reference there are problems that math can't solve, or that you won't be able to solve in time, and that's another part, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot there that obviously science can't solve everything.
Well, that's the one thing it can't solve. It can't solve us being moral people. Let's just be really clear. Like that morality, that's why the book the last chapter is about Kafka, and one of the other most important chapters is about Camus, and there's a big chapter on Nietzsche. Like there's a chapter on Martin Luther, and
that's right. It took like 2 decades for Copernicus, but Martin Luther's 95 Theses were the equivalent of a tweet.
Our argument is that the scientific revolution is a direct descendant of Martin Luther, that questioning things at all was not allowed until Martin Luther did. Questioning the Catholic Church allowed Copernicus, who was nearby, just one kind of country over, and we go through the story of it, but Copernicus learning to argue the point that the planets were all around the sun, he only could put that out there or even think that way because of what Martin Luther had done, sort of 60 miles away. And that the scientific revolution began with something very simple, just questioning, asking simple questions.
Yeah, I think that's the note I know we're out of time, but we should end on them, is that Poe's book it's a roadmap for the questioner. And so I think if there's any message I took away, keep asking questions and encourage others to do so too.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys.
And there is a link to that book directly below us. You can buy the book. We buy through bookshop.org, which supports independent booksellers. So you can support your favorite indie bookseller there. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, as several people have asked where they will be able to find. I'm going to send you all a link as soon as this goes up, but this conversation will be up on Alta Online later today. I am so grateful to Po for doing such great work for Alta, for being such a fascinating and easy, accessible, interesting person. And of course, to my wonderful boss, Blaise Zerega, for taking the time today. Please join us next week, Wednesday, December 9th, here, same time, same place, 12:30. Blaise will be in conversation with Desert Oracle author and publisher Ken Lane. So join us back here next week for that. Again, Po and Blaise, thank you guys so much. And thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Blaise. Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.